One of my favorite skeptics, or realists as he might say, in the world of global warming is our friend Christopher Monckton, Lord Monckton, who joins us now from London, England. Hey, welcome back to the show, Lord Monckton.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Are you on one knee and wearing white gloves?
You know what? We've had you on the show before. We met in Chicago at a climate change conference put on by the Heartland Institute. I was amazed to see so many scholars, PhDs in meteorology and paleo climatology in one room, all of whom had questions or skepticism about global warming, and all of whom had been shunned or marginalized by the massive global warming industry. Is it not true, Lord Monckton, that if you happen to be a skeptic, you're immediately chased out of polite company in academia?
Well, they tried to do that. But to give you an example, last December, I was invited to the 5th Los Alamos Climate Science Conference, which was purely a conference for climate scientists. And I was asked to submit the abstract of a paper to it. So I did, with my name on it, and I was turned down because they said, oh, he's just a skeptic, we don't want him. But the organizer of the conference, who was a fair-minded man, took my name off it, waited a couple of weeks, and submitted exactly the same abstract again. And they said, well, yes, of course, it's a perfectly sensible point he's making, he can come and make the presentation. So there is a lot of politics in this, and a lot of scientists making a lot of money out of pretending that global warming is much worse than it really is. It's not actually a problem, and it's not going to be a problem. But they're all making a fortune pretending it is. The other thing that they have very craftily managed to conceal is that even if there were as much of a problem with global warming as they say, even if we were going to say, let us say, have 3 Celsius degrees of warming over the next 100 years, then it would still be cheaper to do nothing now and leave it to the generation after next to pay the relatively limited costs of adapting to any adverse consequences of that warming that might arise. And that was the result which I presented, in fact, a couple of months ago at the World Federation of Scientists, where now I think it's fair to say the majority of those who attend those conferences once a year on planetary emergencies in Sicily are against the extremist view of global warming. So gradually the scientific community is finding the courage to speak up against this rather poisonous and actually very small clique of politicized scientists who have got into league with largely left-wing governments to try and push this agenda. Now the scientific community is beginning to push back.
What a delight. You know, that's the first I've heard of this, but it sounds like you're going right into the heart of these scientific conferences. The story of how your paper was kept out for personal reasons is appalling, and that's the very antithesis of open and scientific inquiry, but I'm glad someone intervened. But let me shift gears, Lord Monckton. You've talked about how the scientific community is perhaps coming back to its natural balance, but what about politics and diplomats? Because those are the groups that have seized upon a scientific theory, and that's all global warming is, a theory that mankind is doing this to the world, and they've used it for their own political and regulatory and taxation and power-grabbing purposes. You've traveled not just to scientific conferences, but to the climate change diplomats and political conferences yourselves. What are they like? You were recently at the Rio conference 20 years after the original one. What was that like?
That was almost like a kind of funeral rite for the whole environmental movement. They knew they had lost the global warming argument. They were gloomy about it. David Suzuki, who is a relatively famous environmentalist from the United States, actually ran away when I went to shake him by the hand. Richard Branson did the same. They are now frightened because they realise they've got this wrong. They realise they've oversold it. They realise they've made all the money they're going to make out of it. And now they're running scared of, frankly, the kickback that's going to come from ordinary people saying we're not going to have any more of this extreme environmentalist nonsense. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was at Qatar for the 18th successive annual UN climate change conference where all the diplomats go. You don't get many scientists there. You get lots and lots of environmental lobby groups there. And I went to that, and interestingly, They've had these 18 successive conferences, but in 16, the last 16 of the 18 years that they've been running these climate conferences, there has been no, and I mean no, global warming at all for 16 years. And yet they're still there trying to pretend that it's all going to be terrible and we're going to see 3 Celsius degrees of warming by the end of this century. The answer is we're not, and they've got to get used to that.
Lord Monckton, we only have 30 seconds left, but let me ask you this question. While we're spending billions of dollars and an enormous amount of attention on the fake problem of global warming, there are real environmental challenges, especially in the third world. In our final 30 seconds, what do you think a genuine, good-hearted environmentalist should be focusing on to improve the plight of mankind rather than the fake problem of carbon dioxide?
Air pollution in Mexico, India and China, deforestation in Brazil, Haiti and Indonesia, overfishing of the world's oceans, where some of the world's pelagic species are going to be made extinct in no time at all. These are real environmental problems, and they are environmental problems which are serious, but they're also solvable affordably by taking concerted international action now. Those are the things we should be addressing. Forget global warming. It isn't a problem, and even if it were, it's cheaper to do nothing about it and pay the cost of adapting to it than to try to prevent it.
Lord Monckton, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. God bless you all.